Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. And today I am going to discuss the Minnesota Timberwolves and basically how they can go from being stuck in no man's land to, in my opinion, being a serious playoff contender and possibly a title contender, depending on how you would view this team. So I'm going to basically break down in three moves how I think the Timberwolves could go from no man's land to contention. So first of all, I'm just going to go through the Timberwolves' current roster a bit and talk about why I think they would want to move some guys. So you've got Karl Anthony Towns making 27 to 30 million a year over the next couple of years, and basically they're not going to trade him no matter what. You've got Andrew Wiggins, who has 3 more years left, or excuse me, 4 more years left on a deal that's set to pay him around $30 million a year going forward. They are definitely trying to move Wiggins, and he's a guy who can give you between 18 to 20 a game on mediocre to average efficiencies, and he's not really going to do much else besides be like a good scorer for you. And then they've got some other guys like Jeff Teague, who's just like a decent NBA starting level point guard. He's a former All-Star. He's pretty good. Good for about 15 points and 7 to 8 assists a night, depending on the team he's on, but around that production level. They've also got he's making $19 million a year. They've got Gorgui Dieng making $16 million a year as a backup center. He's one of the better backup centers in the league. He could even be a starting center on some teams in the NBA, but really he should just be more of a good backup center rather than a starting center. But so he's making 16. He's probably one of the most overpaid players in the league, but they didn't want to let him go at the time because they thought he might still have some room to develop, but he's kind of turned into what he's going to be in the league, most people think, and that's just like a good backup center. They next have Robert Covington, who's making $11 million a year for the next 3 to 4 years. That is a great contract. Robert Covington was on first team all defense in 2018, so he's a very good player. Other key guys on the team, they've got Jordan Bell and Jake Layman, who they just signed. Jordan Bell from the Warriors, he's only making like $2 million a year. Jake Layman's making $3 million a year from the Trailblazers. Both dudes, they'll get some rotational minutes, but aren't a huge impact on the team. Josh Okogie he's gonna be a sophomore making $2 million a year, so decent player, but nobody to really make a huge fuss about. Maybe like a throw-in and some sort of trade or something. Shabazz Napier is going to be their backup point guard. He's making $2 million a year, and Jarrett Culver's a rookie who is a very, very promising young guy and would be pretty good for this team. So today, looking at some of these trades, I think that the Timberwolves have the assets to really move up in the world and become a really good contender. So the first thing I think they need to do is sign Dwight Howard to a veterans minimum contract and have him both back up Karl Anthony Towns and then also play some minutes with him at the 5 and Karl at the 4, because Karl can space it, so he could play a little bit of power forward. I think Dwight Howard would be a great improvement for this team, but mostly as a backup to basically provide interior defense and sub in for Karl when he needs a break, and just give this team a defensive presence that they have really never had as far as interior defense in the last 3 to 4 to 5 years. So first things first, sign him to a vets minimum deal. The next move would be to pry Kevin Love away from the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I think they're honestly more willing to trade him than a lot of people might think. He's a 30 to 31-year-old star who is still in his prime, and really it's just not what Cleveland needs right now for a team trying to completely rebuild. And so I think honestly the trade to do is Wiggins for Kevin Love, straight up, like about 4 or 5 years ago. That was the deal. I'd say send him right back. Andrew Wiggins is still only like 24, and I think he'd fit in pretty well with this young core of the Cavaliers. He can be just like another guy on the team rather than the guy, like it's not like he would be the number one compared to Colin Sexton or Darius Garland. He could just be like one of the guys on this team. He would slot in nicely to start for them at small forward. They could have a lineup after this of Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Andrew Wiggins, Larry Nance, and Tristan Thompson, with Darius Garland coming off the bench. So I think he would fit pretty well on the team as far as just youth and athleticism. If they drive a hard bargain to give up Wiggins or to give up Kevin Love, the Wolves could also throw in like maybe a future first round pick if they're desperate, or maybe like 2 future second round picks. To me, that's what I would give up to try and get him. So that's the first part of the deal. Try and basically trade Wiggins for Kevin Love and maybe throw in some picks if you have to convince the Cavaliers. But try and limit it to maybe one first round pick, but throw in as many second round picks as you want. But don't do both. Either do Wiggins and a first or Wiggins and like as many second round picks as you want, sort of thing. But don't trade Okogie to them for Kevin Love along with Wiggins, and don't trade Culliver along with Wiggins for Kevin Love. Neither of those guys should be in the trade. They should try and keep those guys. So now we're looking at a lineup that would be looking like Teague, Teague at the 1, probably then Culliver at the 2, probably Covington at the 3, and then Love and Towns at the 4 and the 5 with Dwight Howard, Josh Okogie coming off the bench as your main guys, along with like Shabazz Napier and Jordan Bell. So you'd be looking pretty decent at that point. But then the last trade is one that would really boost them, in my opinion. And this would be if OKC is looking to completely rebuild, which I think they will be here pretty soon. It would be, and it's to acquire Russell Westbrook. I should get that out of the way first. But Russell Westbrook has one of the worst contracts in the NBA. Next year, he's going to be making like 39 to 40 million, and by the last year of his contract lasts for 4 additional years. So next year and 3 years after that, and by the last year, he's making 47 million a year. So it's a pretty bad contract for a dude that already looks like he's at his peak and starting to slightly regress. But I'd still say go for it. Let's try and contend. So you could trade to make the salaries match. You could trade Jeff Teague and Gorgie to OKC. Along with, I would say you'd have to probably give up a first pick or probably more likely 2 first round picks to get him, which the Wolves have first round picks, so they could do this, much like we saw OKC get like 4 unprotected first round picks from the Clippers. The Clippers had all their picks basically, and the Wolves have most all their picks, so you could swing that. You could swing a Jeff Teague, Gorgie, and 2 first round picks for Westbrook. That trade would essentially be Westbrook for the 2 first round picks and cap filler, because Gorgie isn't really going to start for you or anything unless you trade Steven Adams. And Jeff Teague is on an expiring contract, so he would just be essentially salary cap filler for 1 year. He would also get to reunite with Dennis Schroeder, which would be interesting. But yeah, so it'd basically be Westbrook for 2 first round picks. You know, maybe not great value, but you would be getting a decent point guard back in Teague who could start for you on some sort of a rebuilding team if you wanted that. Also Jang. And if they don't accept that, you could also try and do something like Teague, Jang, a first round pick, and like Jarrett Culliver for Westbrook, because you'd be getting a nice rookie back in Jarrett Culliver. I would be hesitant to trade him if I were the Wolves, but maybe they would have to, or sub him out for Josh Okogie possibly if OKC is willing to accept him instead. But let's just say that OKC is willing to accept 2 first round picks, Jeff Teague and Gorgie Jang, in exchange for Russell Westbrook, because they're just looking to rebuild and collect assets like first round picks. If they were to do that deal, between what they got from the Clippers and what they got from the Wolves, they would have their own first round picks along with 9 other first round picks in like the next 5 drafts. So they'd be pretty stacked as far as first round picks and talent and things that they could do to trade, move up, etc., etc. So they'd have a lot of options and be really in a good spot to reload throughout the mid 2020s. And then at the end of this deal, you'd have the Timberwolves with a pretty set team. So let's assume that they keep Culliver and Josh Okogie. Your depth chart would look like Russell Westbrook starting at point guard. His backup would be Shabazz Napier. Starting at shooting guard, you probably have Jarrett Culliver with Josh Okogie as the backup. Starting at small forward, you would have Robert Covington, with again like Josh Okogie would be the backup for him. And then you'd have at the 4 Kevin Love and his backup Jordan Bell. And then at the 5 you'd have Karl Anthony Towns with his backup as Dwight Howard. But basically it would be that starting lineup, and your main bench guys would be Josh Okogie and Dwight Howard, and then Shabazz Napier backing up Russell Westbrook. But I think a core of Kevin Love and Karl Anthony Towns and Westbrook could be pretty good. You get Kevin Love and Westbrook to reunite from their UCLA days. You get a ton of great spacing for Westbrook to be able to penetrate because you have Love who can shoot threes really well. You have Towns who shot over 40% from three last year. So those two guys can space it for Westbrook. You have Covington who can space it really well, and you have Culver who's a decent player who could space it. And if he struggles a little, you could have Josh Okogie start in his stead. But then you would have a good. I think the main problem with this team would be interior defense because Love and Towns would be really bad interior defenders. But that's why you would get Dwight Howard on the minimum contract because then you could sub him in when you need the interior defense, and you could take out Kevin Love or you could take out Karl Anthony Towns and play Dwight Howard, and he can make up for whatever shortcomings those two guys would have on defense. And to me, if you had that team of Westbrook, Culver, Covington, Love, Towns with a bench of Okogie, Dwight Howard, and Shabazz Napier, you could be a top five team in the West. I think you'd be right there with like the Blazers for sure, if not like even better, like a 4 or a 5, as I say. I could see it. So yeah, I would love that trade for the Wolves. As a Wolves fan, that would be like a best case scenario, and I don't think it would happen really. I could see them getting like one of those guys. There have been a little bit of rumblings I've heard about a possible Russell Westbrook trade to the Wolves, but we'll just have to see. But yes, I would definitely say that the Wolves should try and pull something off because they're just stuck in no man's land right now, and they need to improve, and they should take advantage of a team like OKC. Basically, OKC, because of Russell's terrible contract, they have to accept probably around 60 cents on the dollar for what he's really worth because of his contract and his age. So they could pull off something like the Jeff Teague, Gorgie Jang, and a few picks for Russ because he's going to be a hard player to move, honestly. So I think that they could pull this off. That's all I got for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts below if you have any, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.